Hidden away in the bustling streets of Washington, D.C., 150 people sit in quiet awe as a Spanish guitarist enters the stage and plays Tangos de las Vinalias, the song you just heard. Over the next 70 minutes, the historic Gala Hispanic Theater is transformed into an artistic spectacle for the ages, with non-stop clapping, yelling, dancing, and jaw-dropping performances by José Almarcha and his company on stage.
The room is filled with an incredible energy of excitement, camaraderie, and comfortability, as revealed by the smiles on every audience member's face. But hidden away in the joy of this flamenco performance is something more significant. Whether the audience knows it or not, this performance is the diplomacy of the Spanish embassy at work. We'll get into that more later, but first we need to introduce ourselves. Hello, my name is Zach. I'm a freshman here at Georgetown University studying international affairs.
And my name is Ezra. I'm also a freshman at Georgetown. I'm also studying international affairs.
And this podcast is the culmination of a project we have been assigned for our class in music, globalization, and international affairs, studying the politics of representation and cultural diplomacy.
So, our research is examining cultural diplomacy through this analysis of the Spanish embassy in Washington, D.C. We chose to research the Spanish embassy specifically because of the significance of Spanish culture to the nation itself, to the actions of the government acting in its country, outside of its country, internationally, throughout history, and how these efforts have changed over time relating to different regimes in power, different interactions between nations abroad, and how these interactions affect the citizens of the nation as a whole.
And in order to study those themes, our methodology entailed attending 3 events of the Spanish embassy as primary sources of studying cultural diplomacy, as well as extensive research using secondary sources to give context to those events and give us a greater basis of knowledge for our analysis. So to introduce our research and what we've found, we would like to frame our argument through the lens of flamenco, which is a specific element of Spanish culture that we saw represented and elevated in many of our sources. Today, flamenco is learned and appreciated in countries worldwide. It is used by the state as a tool of diplomacy, but it's also largely outside the control of the state. Flamenco is part of a global culture, and in its worldwide presence continues to represent a certain image of Spain.
The recent information, technology, and communications revolutions of the past 20-30 years have enabled globalization of flamenco in new, less regulated lights. For example, José Almarcha, the artist that you've been hearing, published his entire performance and a complimentary album online, allowing listeners around the world to stream his work and appreciate his work. Indeed, the digitalization of media represents a new age for the global appreciation of flamenco.
To understand flamenco's importance to Spanish politics of representation, we need to establish a basic history of Spain's cultural diplomacy on a macro level. Franco's U.S.-targeted diplomacy had 3 main aims. First, Franco targeted tourism, using flamenco as a tool to draw people to Spain, as well as other exciting opportunities to visit the country. Second, flamenco opened Spain to Hollywood productions, allowing Spanish culture to take on a new light in American movies and television and media production through production in the country of Spain. The third leg of Franco's diplomacy efforts had to do with rebranding and public relations efforts that gave citizens of the United States a direct image of the Spanish state. All 3 of these efforts were continued when the Franco regime ended, and the post-Franco regime added an additional dimension of Spain as an exemplar of liberal ideas, as the regime had transitioned to become a democracy. Therefore, Spain was able to relate to the U.S. through this new liberal democratic light.
In the modern day, Spanish cultural diplomacy has focused on the Marca España campaign. Recently, there have been disagreements in the Spanish government regarding the portrayal of a historic, artful, and oriental country instead of the modern European state that Spain actually is, with many arguing that the former state branding is harmful to Spain's opportunities for economic expansion. One thing that state actors have agreed upon, however, is the need to promote a unified Spanish national identity. However, this has been undermined by independent regional efforts of diplomacy and the abundance of division shining through in Spanish art. This has led the Marca España campaign to explicitly state its intentions to promote a unified national image, suppressing internal divides, although these cleavages remain present in holistic perceptions of Spain abroad.
We're now going to discuss 3 specific themes of Spanish cultural diplomacy, each of which being exemplified and represented through flamenco today. We are using primary and secondary sources for this analysis. The first topic that we're going to analyze is the promotion of a traditional or historic culture of Spain. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, art, architecture, and other cultural elements were primary focuses of Spain's image. To reveal further themes about Spain's portrayal as a traditional and historical state, we look into the specifics of one of the events we attended, Sargent in Spain, an art exhibit in the National Gallery of Art here in Washington, D.C. In this exhibit, Spanish culture is represented through the perspective of John Sargent, an American who is traveling through Spain. The exhibit is divided into 8 rooms, each featuring a different stage of Sargent's life or a theme of his work. Topics covered include flamenco music and dance, Spanish architecture, religion, and the natural beauty of Spanish regions such as Granada, Sierra Nevada, and Mallorca. It seems that one of the main focuses of this exhibit is to show that Spain's history is rich and highly cultural and applicable in many ways to U.S. audiences. However, there are some other complicating factors that add to Spain's portrayal as a historic state.
In 1917, the French government created the Committee of French-Spanish Rapprochement in an effort to enhance French-Spanish relations. It even led to the formation of an analogous group in the Spanish government to coordinate bilateral cultural relations. While the French told Spain that they were helping them with their cultural diplomacy abroad, true intentions lay in using Spain as a portal to reach these new markets abroad. While the Spanish Committee found itself mostly subordinated to the more powerful French government, Spain was still able to promote its culture abroad and further attract support for its culture from other countries. In this example, it appears as though France is taking full advantage of the weak Spanish government in order to gain access to foreign markets and earn money. However, Spain was not simply exploited by a stronger nation and left with nothing in return. In fact, the Spanish government was able to promote its culture through soft power resources that could be argued to be as important, if not more important, than hard power strength. European nations developed institutions for the teaching and promotion of Spanish culture throughout their major cities, and foreign nationals flocked to Spain to learn the culture. Additionally, had it not been for foreign involvement within Spain, this development of cultural diplomacy likely would have failed.
Therefore, it can be seen that Spanish culture, specifically through history and tradition, has been seen as very valuable to cultural diplomacy and the politics of representation, both by Spain itself and foreign competition like France. However, there are some conflicts between this portrayal of a traditional and historical culture with the true facts of Spain's modernization and democratization. This brings us to topic number 2.
We are now going to discuss important aspects of modernization, democratization, and intellectual contributions in the modern day of Spain. How is Spain acting as a peer to other European countries? We're going to start off by explaining that our conflict with our first topic, which was the promotion of the traditional culture of Spain. How can Spain portray itself as a modern nation as well as a traditional and historic nation?
Although these two seem to contradict one another, the truth is that Spain probably tries to do a little bit of both, depending on the audience that they're targeting.
One issue here is the idea of Orientalism and the view of Spain as a historical and cultural haven, sustained by the aims discussed before. Multiple nations view Spain as a historic center, but this comes into conflict with Spain's more modern image of itself and display of itself to other countries. Another reality exists where Spain is a modern country grappling with the same issues as its powerful European counterparts. For the majority of Spain, life isn't a magical experience of history and culture. It's the all too familiar struggles of modern industrialization. Although Spain has tended to suppress this truth in the interest of tourism, it has used democratization and intellectual contributions to paint it as a more modern nation. Thus, it is clear that Spain has a difficult relationship with whether or not it wants to be viewed as modern or traditional.
Perhaps this conflict is best embodied through the film Niño de Elche, which we attended a screening of as another primary source. The presentation of this film that we attended is part of a series coordinated by the Embassy of Spain, Mujeres de Cine, and the National Gallery of Art to further the presence of Spanish art and culture in the National Gallery during the term of the Sargent in Spain exhibit that we previously analyzed. The series was particularly focused on highlighting female Spanish directors and their depictions of modern Spanish culture. The film is an experimental, documentary-style exploration of a flamenco performer known as Niño de Elche as he pursues his art in contemporary Spain. The conflict of Spain's history and its modernization are revealed as Niño de Elche struggles to be viewed as a crazed artist of flamenco, existing in a modern world where flamenco is less and less relevant. The movie features nudity, violent animal abuse, and scenes of mental insanity, as Elche embodies the stereotype of a crazed Oriental man. Thus, the struggle between traditional and modern culture in Spain is embodied through Niño de Elche's personal troubles regarding whether or not he is able to keep up with his traditional art in a modern age.
The significance of the film is revealed through its cubist nature. To explain, cubism as a literary technique involves portraying a subject at face value without hiding less desirable aspects. A cubist depiction of someone intends on revealing things as they truly are, not just what appearance makes someone out to be. In the case of the film, cubism has the ability to tell infinite stories through a single film because of its reliance on the audience's interpretation of its seemingly disjointed scenes. While the intention of the film is to dissect Niño de Elche's life, the directors allow the audience to do so as they see fit. Therefore, they do not paint a restrictive image of Spanish culture. Conversely, they actually give American audiences the opportunity to make their own conclusions, allowing them to interpret Spanish culture as they see it.
The modernization of Spain and its interactions with cultural diplomacy are also revealed through the significance of flamenco schools. As mentioned earlier, flamenco as an art form has been globalized since the 1850s, particularly within recent decades.
The power of flamenco to maintain popularity exhibits the strength of Spain's cultural diplomacy, both abroad and domestically. The art form is able to attract both foreigners and citizens to come study in the Spanish flamenco schools that exist across the country. Graduates of these schools move on to promote flamenco across the world. The Spanish government recognizes this significant aspect of its nation's culture, finding it useful as a tool of cultural diplomacy. Additionally, Spanish cultural diplomats understand the necessity to reach foreign audiences, so they allow for a certain hybridization of their culture. That is not to say that they allow flamenco to become corrupted on the world stage, nor is the art form reduced to a simple, forgotten shelf in the back of a record shop labeled world music. Conversely, the confluence of Spanish culture with ideas from foreign groups adds to flamenco as a whole, contributing to the further advancement and promotion of flamenco across the world. By allowing their culture to interact with foreign cultures, Spain lends to its own legitimacy while creating a new form of culture altogether. The popularity of flamenco persists because of the open nature of Spanish cultural diplomacy on the meso level, Spanish citizens interacting with each other and foreign nationals to promote their own culture.
Another element that reveals Spain's politics of representation and modernization is the efforts of academic diplomacy in the past 10 to 20 years. One specific example is the Prince of Asturias chair here at Georgetown University. In this example, we can see that Spain is funding opportunities to increase its presence in the academic sphere, portraying itself as a valuable contributor of intellectual and academic thought. However, there is a specific focus in the Spanish cultural diplomacy to not contribute to a so-called brain drain, where Spanish intellectuals move to other countries instead of contributing to their own national interest. Therefore, we can see in several aspects of Spain's politics of representation that they are trying to portray the national identity as modern, democratic, and contributing to academics and intellectuals. However, just as there seems to be a conflict between the portrayal of tradition and modern realities, there's a similar conflict between the portrayal of a united nation or a divided nation. This brings us to our third and final topic: whether or not the Spanish national identity is portrayed as united or separated. Within the concept of unity, there are evident tensions with diversity and conflict. The question is, how might Spain overcome these differences and portray a singular, solidified national identity? In specific, the divisions in discussion are religion, class, region, language, and ethnicity. Many of these divisions are reflected in the roots of flamenco. For example, flamenco as an art form was first created around the 14th century, when the intermingling of the Moors, Sephardic Jews, and the Roma people produced the multicultural art form. The music originated in Andalusia and southern Spain, which were considered outcast by the Spanish elite. Therefore, inherent in the development of flamenco culture are divisions of religion, ethnicity, region, and class.
One of the most significant instigators of division through Spanish history was General Francisco Franco, who controlled Spain during the mid-1900s. His regime worked to repress different cultures and groups of people that disagreed with his vision, using legal and military forces to suppress them. Hundreds of thousands of people were sent to concentration camps, dialects of Spanish were deemed illegal, and religious groups were barred from freely practicing. In concerted efforts to rebel against the repressive government, marginalized groups celebrated their suppressed cultures through performing arts. In particular, songs were written in banned languages that both promoted those cultures and denounced Franco. Numerous Spanish citizens from across the nation united against their oppressive government, promoting their own cultures in tandem to join together against Franco. As mentioned earlier, Franco initiated many of Spain's cultural diplomacy efforts, and he particularly valued the opinions of Americans. Eventually, when tourism, Hollywood, and public relations did not seem effective in changing Americans' perspectives on Spain, Franco was forced to ease up on persecution of minority groups in order to appease American audiences.
Through two of our primary sources, both Niño de Elche and Sargent in Spain, we can see these themes of class, regional, ethnic, and religious divide shining through. First, in the film of Niño de Elche, there are explicit criticisms of class inequity and Spanish power dynamics. For example, in one interview, it is said that the middle class is united, but only because they hate. The film also represents divisions of queerness and ethnicity, as the Niño de Elche himself tries to navigate these modern struggles. On the other hand, Sargent in Spain has no explicit references to divides in national culture. However, at certain points, you can see division shine through. For example, certain regions are portrayed that are historically associated with disliking the Spanish state. In addition, the focus on religion is primarily Catholic, although there are small themes of other religions shining through. Therefore, the Sargent in Spain exhibit seems to be trying to suppress the presence of division, but still, it's evident if you're looking for it.
Again promoting division, under dictator Francisco Franco, Spain had turned to forceful methods of cultural propaganda in order to disseminate its culture both domestically and abroad. Franco required complete control over the cultural aspects and soft power resources during his time in power, which resulted in a dictatorial approach to soft power that yielded repressive tactics in order to promote Franco's image of Spain, a nation that, in reality, did not exist. In Franco's case, his goals involved full-scale propaganda that promoted an image of a powerful, unyielding Spain that vanquished its enemies. Regardless of the implications of such an image, Franco's view of Spain truly never existed in reality. His style of cultural diplomacy only led to numerous foreign nations breaking diplomatic ties with Spain. It becomes clear that such tactics led to disaster for Spain, culturally, economically, and politically.
The challenges of portraying a unified national identity are also seen in the Alejandra performance by José Almarcha. Many of the cantes or songs covered in this performance refer to profound themes ranging from death and mourning to depression and religious doubt. However, there is something about these themes that is universal. Even for people who are not fluent in the Spanish language, like myself, you can understand the feeling and emotion provoked by the songs. Therefore, it is clear that with efforts like Alejandra, the Spanish state is trying to promote a unified national identity, as everyone is able to understand the themes and the emotions from the performance. This is a good example of the micro level of Spanish diplomacy. With those three focuses being covered, we move to our closing remarks. Indeed, through historic and traditional versus modern and democratic perceptions, or whether it be unity or division, there are many discontinuities and conflicts within the Spanish state's portrayal of itself. It almost feels as though the state can't decide how it wants to represent itself, sometimes united, sometimes divided, and other times historical, other times modern. Perhaps this is because they're trying to target different audiences with different efforts. For example, the audience at the Gala Hispanic Theater, which was majority Spanish-speaking and largely had ties to Spain, was far different from the audience at the National Gallery of Art, where most of the people were museum-goers with no particular interest in Spain.
This brings us to the globalization of flamenco, which, as we have seen, promotes a massive part of Spanish cultural diplomacy. We can see that the state is taking full advantage of this cultural diplomacy aspect in order to promote their culture abroad. There is also a part of flamenco that goes beyond the state. We have analyzed the individual people behind the representations and diplomacy efforts of how flamenco is supported and promoted across Spain and across the globe. And given the popularity of flamenco, we have been able to appreciate the culture and the opportunity to research it. All in all, flamenco constitutes a significant portion of Spanish cultural diplomacy efforts, and as we are able to research Spanish cultural diplomacy, we see the significance of the art form to a nation, to a government, and to the people.
So with all of that being said, we return to the image of the Gala Hispanic Theater, where Alejandra is coming to a close. As the song finishes, the audience stands to applaud, shouts in support, and a general community and appreciation is felt throughout the room. It's a beautiful moment, and despite the many contradictions of portrayal that are contained and embodied by this show, we believe it is exactly this type of positive, appreciative moment that best represents Spain. We would like to thank Professor José Roda for giving us the opportunity to complete this fantastic project, for all of those who enabled us to go study our primary sources, and to you for listening. We hope you enjoyed.